Most people think fascism started with a march on Rome in 1922. They see a man with a jutting jaw on a balcony and think that's the whole story. It isn't. That's the end of the beginning. The real story of where fascism came from is stranger, darker, and far more complicated. It's a story that's not taught in political halls, but in art galleries, in bohemian cafes filled with poets and pirates, and in the blood-soaked trenches of the First World War. Today, we are digging up the twisted roots of an ideology that didn't just appear out of thin air. We are going back to the source. This is the untold origin story of fascism. Welcome back. If you're new here, our goal is to unearth uncommon knowledge. Today, we are tackling one of the most misunderstood subjects in the modern history. We are going to connect dots you probably didn't know existed. From an Italian art movement that worshipped speed and violence, to a French philosopher who believed in the cleansing power of myths, and finally, to a renegade poet who ran a pirate city-state that became the blueprint for dictatorship. Let's jump in. Before 1914, Europe was bubbling with a sense of unease. The old world of rationalism, democracy, and comfortable middle-class materialism felt stagnant to a new generation. They wanted action. They wanted to feel alive. Enter Filippo Tommaso Marinetti. In 1909, he published the Futurist Manifesto on the front of a major Parisian newspaper. This wasn't just about art. It was a declaration of war on the past. Listen to what he wrote. We want to glorify war, the only cure for the world. Militarism, patriotism, the destructive gesture of the anarchist, and the beautiful ideas which kill. Contempt for woman. Beautiful ideas which kill. Marinetti and the futurists believed that the old Italy of museums and professors needed to be burned down, so a new industrial Italy will arise. They worshipped speed, machines, and violence as a cleansing force. This wasn't just fringe stuff. These artists were creating the aesthetic of the future fascist state. Dynamic, aggressive, totally uncompromising. They were priming the culture for politics of action over thought. While the futurists were aestheticizing violence, a French thinker named Georges Sorel was philosophizing about it. Sorel wasn't a fascist, but his ideas were like dynamite waiting for a match. He despised democracy and parliamentary pro-compromise. Sorel argued that masses of people aren't moved by reason, but by myths. Powerful emotional images that inspire action without requiring deep thought. For him, the ultimate myth was the general strike. He believed that violence, when used by the working class, was a moral and heroic force that could shatter the corrupt bourgeois order. Mussolini, a young socialist at the time, was a huge admirer of Sorel. He saw how a powerful myth could mobilize a nation better than any policy paper. Then came the Great War. For Italy, it was a catastrophe. Hundreds of thousands died for mere gains. But for a specific group of soldiers, it was a crucible. Meet the aridity, the daring ones. These were elite shock troops who led suicide missions across no man's land. Armed with daggers and grenades, they lived with death every day. They developed a trench mentality. a deep bond of brotherhood, a hatred for the politicians back home who they felt had betrayed them, and an addiction to violence. When the war ended, these men didn't just go back to being farmers and clerks. They became the foot soldiers of the upcoming revolution. They were the first black shirts. After the war, Italy was promised great territorial gains but got very little at the peace table. This was called the mutilated victory. The anger was palpable, and one man decided to do something about it. Gabriel D'Annunzio. D'Annunzio was famous, a war hero, a celebrated poet, and a notorious womanizer. In 1919, he led an army of mutinous Ariditi and nationalists to seize the city of Fiume on the coast of modern-day Croatia. For 15 months, he ran it as his own personal dictatorship. Fiume was a bizarre, it was a pirate utopia. It attracted artists, anarchists, drug addicts, and revolutionaries from all over Europe. But it was here, in this chaotic laboratory, that the entire ritualistic playbook of fascism was invented. The Roman salute, D'Annunzio did it first. The black shirts, his Ariditi wore them. The meaningless war cries, he invented them. The emotional, charged balcony speeches where the leader dialogues with the crowd. That was his signature move. He even wrote a constitution, the Charter of Canaro, which was a wild mix of radical syndicalism and poetic nonsense, guaranteed things like free love and declared music to be a fundamental principle of the state. It was political theater as a form of government. Mussolini watched it all, took notes, and realized this works. By 1921, Italy was on the brink of collapse. Communist revolutionaries were paralyzing the country with strikes. The liberal government was powerless. The middle class was terrified. Mussolini, ever the political opportunist, saw this moment. He took the aggressive aesthetic of the futurist, the myth-making power of Sorel, the violent manpower at the Ariditi veterans, and the theatrical rituals of D'Annunzio's Fiume, and synthesized them into a new movement, the Fasci di Combattimento. He presented fascism as the only force strong enough to smash the communist threat and restore order. He offered a new myth for a broken nation, a rebirth of the Roman Empire through discipline, violence, and total obedience to the state. It wasn't a coherent ideology. It was an anti-ideology, held together by brute force and a charismatic leader. The rest, as they say, is history. So, fascism didn't begin with a dictator on a balcony. It began as a twisted cultural response to a world that felt like it was falling apart. It was born from a desire to burn down the past and build down a future of a foundation of a beautiful violence and heroic myths. It's a stark reminder that when reason fails and people feel unheard, they become susceptible to the darkest kind of political theater. If you found this deep dive valuable, like this video, subscribe for more uncommon knowledge. Let me know in the comments what other historical origins you want us to explore. Thanks for watching.